So, Jean, first of all, thanks very much for joining me with this session. Could you just tell the people who are watching what it is that you do, but also what it is, why you decided you needed a story for the piece of work you're doing at the moment?
Yes. So on my daily basis, I'm an Android developer. I make apps for Android phones, and I'm also team lead at the same time. So I'm working with a few other people on specific projects. That's on what I do. What I'm trying to do right now and why is about next week, 5th of December.
Hmm.
I'm registered to a conference where guess 100 to 200 people will be,
Yep.
mostly from my company and some others related to the same area. So I work in public transport in Norway, so it's a bunch of companies working in that domain.
Okay. So you're just to recap. So you're an app developer, but also team leader. How many
Yes.
people in your team within the company where you work? How many people do you need to present?
My team is about 10 people.
Okay. Okay.
Not only
Okay.
developers, like we have half developers, and then it's like product owners and like some other stuff like that.
Okay. So the conference next week is to you're going to have between 1 and 200 people.
Hmm.
How long do you have? How long a time slot?
30 minutes.
How many? Sorry,
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Okay. Okay. And so, what is it that you want to get across to people? What do you want them to come away remembering and or deciding to do as a result of your presentation?
So the idea it's about considering new or different platforms that what people are used to.
Hmm.
So in my domain, like probably 90% of the project people works on are for mobile phone. So
Yep.
like an iPhone or Samsung Galaxy or whatever, stuff
Yep.
like that. But very few works on watch, for example,
Mm.
and even fewer on TV or if we go crazy on Apple Car or Android Car. So
Mm.
the idea was like to try to make people consider that they can actually do some innovation in a way, but also like have a bit of fun because it's always a little bit funnier to work on new stuff
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
the usual routine. So
Hmm.
that's the idea. It's not
Okay.
like I want them to do something. It's more like to try to motivate people to, or give them the idea like, oh yeah, actually we're limiting ourselves there, and maybe we can expand a little bit, or try
Mm.
at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Because so you're thinking, okay, we know that people like to use their phones when they're navigating a new city, for example,
Yeah.
waiting for a bus or a train. We know they like to use their phones, but what else? Because actually, they've got a smartwatch.
Mm.
Or, I mean, if you've seen the things that Ray Bans are making now,
Yeah.
these kind of smart glasses.
Yeah.
Well, okay, who knows what it's going to be?
Mm.
It might not be people because it's good, but some people don't like walking around.
Yeah. You still have to watch it actively, like you say, if you have the glass and then it shows you directly where the bus stop is, for example, then
Yeah, and when the bus is coming, or something in your earpiece that tells you this.
mm.
Okay, so 90% of projects. This is interesting. So 90% of projects are purely based on mobile because we know that works.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's hunch from me. Like I don't have any data on that, like saying it's actually 90%, but from
So
my personal experience, that
yeah.
around 10 year, it's something like that.
Okay. Okay. And okay, so there's some very interesting cards that come to my mind straight away. You've already started work on a little bit of a story, which we'll come to in a
Yes.
minute, which I think is really a nice way of treating of approaching this talk. Before I go into that, give me a sense of because when you're approaching a talk at a conference, I think it's always good to think, okay, where do you fit in the day? So there's a running order of speakers,
Okay. Yeah.
and you're thinking, okay, well, who's going to be before me and who's going to be after me? So what are the audience expecting? Now,
Mm.
if you know what the audience is expecting, you can do two things. One is you can give them exactly what they're expecting, right? In which case you're fitting in really neatly. But the other thing you can do is you can try and surprise them by something that they're not expecting. So do you know yet where else you appear in the who else is
Yeah.
around you in
Yeah, I got the program, and I'm around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. In the
Okay.
program, I'm second to last. I think there is one more talk after mine,
Hmm.
and then the day is over.
Okay. Okay. Well, in a way, that's good because people tend to remember things. So
Yeah, that's true.
people remember will often remember. There's a uh, description called peak end. So people remember the kind of the high point in the day, the peak, but they also remember how the day ended. So if you're the last person up, you've got a
Mm,
good chance of being remembered. Okay, but if you're not the last person up, you need to get the peak. So you need to get them to remember something very clearly, a very strong
mm.
image or very strong feeling, which is where I think stories come in. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the story, the idea you've had already about how you could use a story
Yeah,
as part of your talk.
yeah. So the whole thing started when I was on parental leave in English.
Hmm.
Pappaperm, it's called in Norwegian, where I'm living. Um, it's about 4 months where the father is with the kid, so we
Hmm.
are pretty lucky with that. So
Mm.
uh, a bit of context with it is so it was during the summer, and we were having like really time of our life. Everything's super good. Going around in nature, hiking, biking, so super nice. The thing is, in Norway, we do have. I guess you're used to that in UK also. At least the bad weather
Oh
is
yeah.
from reputation also over where
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
I
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So in that period where it was like 2 3 days of constant rain and not very warm weather,
Hmm.
um, my kid was starting like to get really feral, to say the least, and like really frustrated of being stuck inside. So I was like trying to make her survive herself and like bring her up and down the stairs and all that kind of crazy things. So I was getting like a bit tired, or yeah, that's the thing, getting tired. But eventually managed to sleep, so I had like about an hour to relax a bit,
Hmm.
and it was probably on the third day, so I was like, okay, let's just sit in the couch or whatever, watch
Hmm.
TV, and I sort of instantly regretted it. Like I was like, what am I doing here? I'm just like,
Hmm.
I have 1 hour per day, and I'm just almost wasting it on
Yep.
watching TV shows or whatever. So I tried to find something that I could do like in a short period of time, but maybe every day a little bit. And I remember I had like this project or hobby project I started a few months ago, and I even presented it a year ago in the company, but that's basically where it stopped. So it was like
Hmm.
just proof of concept, let's
Hmm.
say. So I was like, okay, maybe that can be something I can do like max an hour a day. I don't have more
Hmm.
time anyway. So
Yep.
just trying to update it, and that was basically the start of it. Um,
And this project you're talking about was
yeah,
related to this idea of using other ways of accessing information
not
rather than.
directly.
Okay.
So at first it was really just a basic project where it was on my phone also. That's what
Hmm.
I'm used to. So it was like
Hmm.
comfort zone thing
Hmm.
in a way.
Hmm.
So about a month after that, so around the end of September or beginning of September, I was done with it, and then I realized like, well, I can just try on other stuff. Like I don't have any expectation on this or deliverables or anyone
Hmm.
putting pressure on me, so I can just try and see where it goes. That's where I started to pull the thread in a way and see how far I could go.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and that took you into, okay, there are other ways we could be thinking about this,
Mm, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
not just the mobile phone.
Mm,
Okay, okay, okay. Now, I'll give you some feedback on that story so far, and then I'll ask you some questions, and we'll see if we can make it a bit sharper. So
mm,
the first bit of feedback is it works really well as a little movie. So there's a card which you may have seen in the deck called Movie Time.
mhm.
And this is basically the one of the most useful cards in the deck because when you're telling a story, so I'm at home with my daughter, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
my new daughter. We're doing all the crazy parent things, but actually, it sometimes I've got an hour a day where I can just do a little bit of work rather than just watching telly. And so I picked up this project. So that's giving us a little movie. There you are. with your daughter. She's asleep. You're going, okay, what am I going to do? And so there's the action in the movie. The emotion is kind of curiosity, which is a powerful emotion of,
Yeah.
ah, I wonder what I could do with that project. Okay, so there's your action and your emotion. So that works as that will really stick in people's minds because it's a movie, because they can
Yeah.
see what that looks like. Everyone's seen,
Mm.
even if you're not a parent, everyone can picture
Yeah.
looking after a small child. Okay, so that's good. Now, you can do something to kind of heighten the drama in a story, and the easiest way to do it is to actually heighten the emotion. So, you could, by talking about the highs and lows of being a dad. Well, one of the highs is you get to spend this fantastic time with these amazing young humans. Yeah, the lows are it seems like everything else, is dragged out of your life. And then you finally get that hour to yourself and you just watch TV and you feel really, yeah. So you can bring it right down as well as right up. So you can make
Yeah.
the emotion into that relevant by
So a lot of
accentuating
contrast between the two.
a lot of contrast. That's what we like in story,
Mm.
lots of contrast. Okay. So that's a little thing you can do. Now, the third element of a movie time, excuse me, a movie time story. Well, the first element is action. We've talked about that. Second element is emotion, that allows you to give it that kind of contrasting rise and fall. But the third element is meaning. And in this case, you're saying, okay, well, why am I telling you this story? Right. So this is where I think it needs a little bit of a sort of sharpening up as well.
Mm.
Is, well, why am I telling you this story? And partly the why is because I want to establish myself as a decent person. I want to establish myself in this story as a character. So this
Mm.
story works for you, I think, quite well because it says,
Mm.
look, I'm a normal human being. I've got family. I've got, I'm busy like everyone else. So you're establishing yourself as a kind of a nice guy, which is good because
Mm.
we trust character. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't trust people's CV. We trust their character. Or we
Mm.
don't trust your qualifications. We trust your character. So that's kind of important. It's good. But I think you can get some more out of this story, some more meaning out of the same story. Okay, so there's another. So one is, look, I'm a nice guy, I'm a dad, and I work hard. Great. The second meaning you could play with is that thing about curiosity. So there's a card in the red section of Storyteller Tactics. There's a card called. Let's see if I can find it. Curious Tales. Hang on a second. Let's see if I can find it. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So this card is called Curious Tales. And the reason why you tell a story about curiosity is, well, when you tell me that you've gone, oh, hang on, oh, look at that. That's weird. And then you follow that little thread. Yeah, you follow your curiosity. I become a little bit curious about your thing too. So
Mm.
your curiosity is contagious. I'll catch a little bit of your curiosity. So you can lead me off down a nice little direction that you thought was. So you're sitting there going, well, yeah, we could do this for mobile phone, but we always do mobile phone. What if, what if it's somebody's smart TV that they're watching at home and so you start getting curious. And so, okay, so that's another added meaning that you can add to the story of, hey, look, I'm curious about this. I became curious about this. And that's quite contagious. So I'll
Mm.
think, oh, okay, I wonder why. So why is Jean curious about this? What do we need to know? So that's another reason why that little story you can add more meaning to a nice little story. So it doesn't just become a bit of idle chat.
Mm.
It's not just small talk. It's got some added meaning, and the added meaning is, okay, so I'm now becoming really curious about this, and I think you should be curious too. So then you're leading yourself into the main part of the story, which is, okay, now if you could add in, because you're trying now to make this story work really hard for you. Yes, you're not just telling it because you're passing time. You're telling it for a reason. So you can think, okay, can I make a connection here between the little story of me working at home during my paternity leave. That's the little picture story, and the big picture story, which is me trying to help people navigate public transport.
Mm.
Okay. So you'd think, well, okay, well, maybe there's something that I did that summer during paternity leave that involved getting on public transport with my daughter. Or maybe it was to do with, well, it's to do with the platform thing. So I was sitting there with the TV on and thinking, oh, hang on a second, we're doing everything from mobile phone. Maybe we should be working with people's TV, or else, So maybe there's something else.
Yeah.
You've built this little story world, yes, this little movie, and you've got some meaning from it, which is I'm a nice guy, I work hard. But you can add more meaning. I got curious, and you should be curious too. Maybe you can even make it work harder for you still by telling us about a moment where you in that paternity leave moment in your life, you had that thing of, okay, maybe we need to go beyond the mobile phone into other platforms, but it happens
Mm.
in the same movie. So you're
Yeah.
making that movie work really, really hard for you.
I
Now the other
think I do have a moment like that actually.
Go on.
Um, like before we talked together, like I tried to prepare like sort of a script, and I had like a few ideas. And one moment I actually remembered was after I was sort of done with the hobby project thing on my phone. I did let it on the side for a week or two or whatever, and I was on my way downtown one day with my girl, and we were waiting at the bus stop, and I
Yep.
saw someone watching at their smartwatch, and
Ah.
that's where actually I was like, actually, like I don't need the phone. It could just be like on the watch or the thing I'm doing. So I could actually try to like go from a mobile app to a smartwatch app. So exactly what you were saying, but instead of a TV, it's a watch basically.
Do you have a smartwatch yourself?
No, I actually don't have one. Or I
Okay.
do have one, but not one I can use to make apps on.
No. Okay. See, if I was going to do the kind of the Hollywood version of this story,
Mm.
right, where everything is perfect in the story, in the
Yeah, I should
Hollywood
have.
in the Hollywood well, no, well, in the Hollywood version of the story, one of two things: either you could have your own smartwatch, but better still, the person who's checking on their watch is checking on their watch because they've got a child in this arm,
Oh yeah, true,
right?
true. Like, and they can't use the phone.
They can't use the phone because they
Yeah,
don't want to
true,
be
true.
using the phone. So they've got the child in this arm, right? And they're thinking about the bus, and then they just quickly want to check. They're trying to check on their watch, yeah. And wouldn't it be so much easier if their little voice, something in their little
Mm.
voice said that your bus is coming in 2 minutes?
Mm.
Wouldn't that be down? That would be
Yeah,
easy.
that would be nice.
Now you've got choices here. You can either pretend that's exactly what happened in the Hollywood
Yeah,
version,
a
yes,
little like to make it better.
yeah, invent
Yeah,
invent a child who
yeah, yeah.
didn't exist. Yeah, you could do that, or you can do it in imagination. You could say, so I'm standing there at this bus stop watching somebody tapping on their watch and thinking, well, I can't do that. I'm holding my daughter in one arm and
Mm.
I can't tap on my watch with the other arm. So what if it was in my earphone instead? And it was just an audio reminder. So yes,
Mm.
you can make up a little bit here to sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
okay, but either way you're getting lots and lots of energy and meaning out of that lovely story that you're telling about paternity leave.
Mm.
I think you've got 30 minutes in the talk now. Obviously the timing of this thing is really key. I think if you're going to start somewhere unexpected, so most people will come onto the stage and they'll say, "I've developed this app for Android and iPhone, and I'm going to tell you about my app." Right?
Mm.
That's the standard
Typical
presentation.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, typical thing. And everyone goes, "Okay, let's listen." If you're going to go off and say, "Look, I'm going to tell you about a fantastic 4 months I spent this summer on paternity leave," okay, so you're going to go off in a little bit of a different direction.
Mm.
On the one hand, it's fantastic because it's a change, it's refreshing. Yes, it's a nice change.
Yeah.
But you have to be aware that after a certain amount of time, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, and people are going to start wondering why. Why is he telling us this nice story? So either your way of getting around that is either to attach it to the very, very top of the presentation. So at the very top, and there's a great card here called Story Hooks, which
Yes.
allows you to think about the very, very beginning of your presentation. And you shouldn't go on stage and say, hello, my name is Jean, and I'm here today to talk to you about, because we know that already. You're on the program.
Yeah.
Yes. So we know that. You're wasting time. But with a story hook, you can ask a question, or you can give people something that they're not expecting, or you could talk about something ironic. So in this case, you could use, and what I would suggest with story hooks is you try lots of different ones and see which you think works best.
Yeah.
But you could say, look, what can a 3-month-old baby teach us about
All right. Yeah.
public
Innovation or something like that.
yeah, exactly, public
Yeah.
transport information. And so you're giving the people a little puzzle, yeah, that they don't and then you start talking about your baby, but they know you're going to come back because you've told
Yeah.
them in the hook that this is going to be about public transport information. So they're going to stick with you during the story going, okay, how's this going to connect? Okay. So that's a nice little trick to do so that you don't, when you launch into a story they're not expecting, that's great because it makes people come awake and go, oh, wasn't expecting this. But you can make it go for too long and people are going, what's the point? Why is he telling us about his... Okay. But if you do this at the top with a story hook, I know you're eventually going to tie it back. Interestingly, have you listened to Donald Trump on Joe Rogan? Trump talks about doing the weave, and he basically goes off on and he talks about stuff over here. Like he talks about stuff that's like right over here, and then he kind of brings it back to the point he's trying to make. But sometimes it goes for absolutely ages, but it always comes back to the point he's trying to make. Okay, so you can do the same, but you need to come back to the point you're trying to make. So if you use a story hook, you're telling us in advance this is going to be useful about okay. So that's the thing to think about. What I would say with story hooks is there are 6 different ways to write a hook on the card. Try all 6,
Okay.
right, and then see which one you like. Okay. Story hooks also are very, very useful when say you want to turn your talk, your presentation, into a post for social media, for LinkedIn, for example.
Right.
A story hook's very good. Okay, so you've got a hook, you've got a movie time story. That allows you to get into things like curious tales, right? Where you're saying, okay, I'm really curious about this. We should all be curious about this. Okay. Now, there are other. Given that you're not kind of, I suppose you're not pitching for people to buy into this idea. You're trying to get them interested. Okay.
Yeah, it's more interested than I'm not trying to sell anything or
Yeah.
convince anyone to start anything. That's not really the
Okay.
point.
Okay, and it's not a job interview. You're not kind of going for a job.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. But there are other cards in the deck I think might be useful for you when it comes to, okay, you're talking about a technical solution to a problem.
Yeah.
Effectively. Okay. Well, this is quite a lot of customers are, for Storyteller Tactics, come at this from the same point of view. They are bringing a technical solution to people and saying, okay, here's what I think you need to solve your problem. So there are various cards in there which I think are really, really useful. Some of the really simple ones. So even though we said this is not a pitch, okay, it still sometimes helps to think about selling you, because you're selling your idea to people. So there are very basic cards worth looking at. There's quite a few actually that are around selling, but there we are. Where are we? There's a card in the explore category called social proof, and social proof is about finding examples of other people who are doing what you're talking about. That could be in terms of data trends. Here's lots of people doing this. It could be about prototypes. Very important. What you're talking about is prototypes, or it could be testimonials from people who've tried to do something like this and say, yeah, this works really, really well. So social proof. So you've got through with your talk, you've given us the hook, you've given us a story, and now you're giving us the idea.
Mm.
Okay, so social proof is quite a useful card for the idea. Another card that is really useful in the blue section of the deck for this kind of work is the story, a card called Innovation Curve. Now, I think this is a really useful card for anyone who's dealing with technology as a
Mm.
way of saying, okay, here's my idea for what we should do with this new technology. And the idea of the curve on the back is basically, look, there are people who are very keen to adopt new things, the innovators and the pioneers. Then there are people who are kind of hanging on, waiting for a bit, but they will adopt if they think it's going to work. They're the early adopters. Then you've got the late adopters, and then finally you've got the traditionalists. So, in this case, I often think of this as relating to mobile phones. The very, very first smartphone, the iPhone 1, well, only the pioneers got that because it was too expensive and
Mm.
it was a bit of an unknown quantity. And then I was probably an early adopter and I got an iPhone 3. And then there were people who were buying them for companies. Once it was really established that these were reliable
Mm.
technology, corporate organizations started buying them. And then finally, at the far end, there was people like my mum who didn't like the
Yeah.
iPhone. Yeah, she wanted a Nokia. She wanted a little push button Nokia
Yeah.
because it took photographs, made calls, could send texts, and she was really happy with that.
Yeah.
And the only reason she finally switched to using an iPhone was the whole family started using WhatsApp
Right.
for
And that
chat,
she.
and she was
Yeah.
missing out.
Yeah.
And so there's different messages for different people as they are along that curve. You need to give them a different message and tell them a different story. So with the
Mm.
pioneers, the story is, hey, this is new. This is
Yeah. That's enough
exciting.
for them.
Exactly. And you're probably a pioneer. So you're just excited because it's new,
Mm.
right? But for the traditionalists or the late adopters, that is absolutely not the right message. In fact, that's scaring them away.
Yeah.
And what you need to tell them is this works.
Mm.
Look, those guys over there, right? These guys over here, they're using it already and it's fine.
Mm.
Or they're using something similar. Yep.
It doesn't
Something
have to be the same. Yeah.
exactly could be as long as it's similar. These guys are using something similar and they're fine. So that's a really useful. So you're not just telling stories about, okay, I'm really curious about this because I'm really excited, right? Well, that's fine for pioneers,
Mm.
but it's not okay for late adopters. The late
Mm.
adopters, they need social proof of, oh look, these other people over here are doing something similar.
Right.
So yeah, so those all now, so that will all give you different ways of thinking about what do you say about your idea to give it more, yeah, more strength
Mm.
for the audience you're talking to. What I would say finally is, and then I'll ask you, what to sort of try and what's be a really nice trick to do from the presentation. And remember, people remember the peak of any presentation, but they also remember the end, right?
Right.
So what would be really nice to do is think about how you're going to end and think about, can you at the end of the talk, you've started off by giving us this story of you and your daughter. Can you somehow at the end come back to your daughter in some
Yeah.
way so that, yep, so you're finishing where you started. And remember, if we talked about using a story hook and to say, okay, so the story hook goes at the beginning of the presentation, and if you ask a question, by the end you have to answer it. So you could
Right.
say at the end. So you remember at the beginning of the talk, I asked you, what can a 3-month-old baby teach us about? Well, here's what I think. You're giving them the answer. So if you ask a question at the beginning, give an answer at the end. If you create a puzzle at the beginning, solve it at the end. If you say something unexpected at the beginning, explain why at the end. Yeah, so it's a way of making it really clear that, okay, this is the point I'm trying to make. But you do it, and again, if you can do it by going back into the same little story you told at the beginning, then it makes it feels really satisfying for the audience, rather than just getting to the end of your talk and going,
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a way, it's like to finish the loop in a way, and just like finishing the story in meaningful way. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Yes, closing the
Mm.
loop. You're absolutely right. Okay, so um, I think, and in terms of moving people forward, as you said, you're just inviting them to think more broadly.
Yeah.
So I don't think in this case it's not like you're pitching for funding or telling people how a project is going to unfold over time.
No.
So the kind of the timeline. So the other cards in the story, in the story structures, like rags to riches, these are
Mm.
all useful structures for explaining how something is going to unfold over time. So we're
Mm.
going to we're going to start here, and we're going to end up here. Um, I tell you what would be a useful card to think about while you're structuring your talk, particularly the beginning, the first 5 minutes where you're talking about you and your daughter. Okay, there's a card. There's a card called Man in a Hole. I don't know if you've come
Right.
across this one yet.
Mm.
Okay. And the reason why I think of this one is because you start in your comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then you fall in a hole or you get knocked down into a hole, but then you climb out to a better place. And something you were saying to me about when you picked up that project again, that kind of passion project, and
Mm.
thought, oh, I'm going to work on this while my daughter's asleep. Okay, so you picked that project up. You started in your comfort zone.
Yes. Mm.
Yes, you started just doing the thing you always do, which is Android
Mm.
and an iPhone. Um, and then you realize, yeah, that's not that's not satisfying enough for me. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone and try other platforms, other ways of doing
Mm.
this. And it should get harder before it gets better. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Because you stay in your comfort zone, it's fine. But going out of your comfort zone should get harder, not easier, and
Mm.
then you start creating something really valuable. So that's a nice card to think about for you for that beginning sort of 5 minutes before you start
Mm.
getting into the prototype that you're going to be sharing with
Right.
people.
It does
Okay.
echoes to what you were saying a little bit before, also with the contrast. Like, it needs to go pretty low for going pretty high again after.
Yes, and
Mm.
and the drop down can be anything from getting it wrong at first, making mistakes, finding it more difficult than you thought it was going to be, wondering why have I decided to do this? This is silly, or this is harder than I thought, or I'm confused, I'm lost. Any of those things can bring you down. Why don't I just stay doing what I was doing all the time?
Mm.
Okay, any of those can bring you down, and then there's usually a little moment where you go, oh, wait a minute. So the little moment where you go, oh, wait a minute, there could be where you see somebody standing at the bus stop and think, well, she doesn't need smartphone, she needs something else.
Mm.
Okay, okay. Um, so listen, that's my thoughts on that. I think, as I say, you've started off already with a really nice movie time story. You just need to
Mm.
add some more meaning to it to make
Mm.
it relate to the rest of the story. Develop a story hook at the beginning, and then think about that movie time story with maybe a kind of man in a hole structure and some curious tales, and then the rest of the talk is about social proof and the innovation curve of
Mm.
why do I think you should also look at these platforms, and then come back to the story at the end. How does that sound?
It sounds like I have a lot of puzzle pieces, and now I
Mm-hmm.
need to figure out like how to put them together.
Mm.
And it feels a bit more complicated than a regular puzzle. It's more like I have 100 pieces, but the puzzle is 25, so I need to figure out which one to use to actually make the picture. And
Yeah, that's right.
that's a
Somebody's
difficult thing.
mixed.
Like
Yeah,
that,
somebody's
I
take.
have trouble to like I have a deck myself, and like I'm like, yeah, I can use this card, but I can also use that one and that one
Mm,
and that one, and I'm like,
mm,
before I started, like I always heard like you need to find an angle to your story, but I
mm.
always thought like once you have the angle, then you can just go. But I never realized that you had 20 different angles that you can find, and each angles has focus on something different. So based on what you want to say will
Hmm.
sound in a way or in another way depending on the angle. And I really feel like why it's complicated to tell stories. Like you need to feel, or you need to figure out which tools you want to use and how you tell the story.
I agree. I agree. I think that my advice there would be okay. Two things in terms of advice. The first is okay. So follow your instinct. So there's a really good trick generally for using the storyteller tactics cards is to how do you find the right card to use? Well, the best tip really is read them all, but only read the first two sentences on the page there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So go through every single card and just go, yeah, okay, maybe. No. Maybe not. No, and just sort them out into two
Mm.
piles of okay and no, and then just
Yeah.
go to. So that's one way of very quickly sorting out. You're just using your instinct to
Mm.
take you towards what you think you need to do. Okay,
Yeah.
and it is
Mm.
and it is instinctive. There isn't a system. It's not like writing code. There is. I mean, having said that, even writing code can
Mm.
be instinctive.
Mm.
But that's first thing. Follow your instincts. Second thing is test the story out with other people.
Right.
So in this case, the biggest challenge I think you've probably got is making the movie time story of you and your daughter connect to the wider. So in other words, making the little picture connect to the big picture. And
Mm.
the big picture is okay. I'm building this prototype. You should think about these things too. So it's that connection between the two that I think is really important. And
Mm.
sometimes, so when you've tried the story out, and you need to test it with somebody who will give you feedback and say, look, did that make sense? Yeah. And I say so the connection between the little picture and the big picture. Well, there's several ways you can do it. The first is with the story hook at the beginning.
Right.
So, yeah, you're saying, I'm going to tell you a story about me and my baby daughter, but it's going to be all about platforms. Okay, so you make it really clear in the hook. Then there's moments when you go from the little picture story to the big picture story, and you've got to be really, really clear. So,
Mm.
what I think this means is, yeah, and you'd be really clear about it, about how this little experience relates to this big idea. And then you can do that excuse me, you do that at least twice. Well, you do it three times in effect. You do it once at the very, very beginning in the story hook. You tell the story, you then bridge into the big picture story. So you do it again, you make it very, very clear there's a connection here. And then at the end, you make the connection again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So three times at least. Yeah, three times is good. The other thing as well. The other thing I would just say as well, before we kind of wrap up, then I'm going to ask you to: will this presentation be videoed?
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually, it
brilliant!
is.
Oh, good,
I'm I'm pretty sure it is. I asked and I got the yes answer. So if
good.
everything goes accordingly to plan, it should be.
Well, what we'd like to do is to post this video of our conversation, followed by the
Yeah.
video of your presentation, so people can
Mm.
see how it turned out. What I would say is really useful as well. I mean, this is not in storyteller tactics; it's more about a
Mm.
sort of public speaking advice, really. But I would think when you've written your script and think about how many times during that script. Well, how many times are you telling a story? Well, we know you're going to tell a story at the beginning and you're going to
Mm.
come back to the story at the end. Okay, that's good. Okay, how many times during that script are you interacting with the audience? Because
Right.
that's, I think, really important because it kind of wakes people up, especially because you're on at
Mm.
2 o'clock. You're on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when everyone's had their lunch and they're ready to have
Yeah.
a little sleep like
Mm.
your daughter. They're ready to have a little sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you could even play with that idea. Yes, you could say, look, we've just all had lunch. How many of you in here are ready for a little sleep?
Mm.
Well, my daughter is too, and when she's had her lunch, but she's only 6 months old. Okay, so you can have a little bit of fun with that. Okay,
Mm.
but when she was asleep, I did some fun. I found out, I did some fantastic work, and I want to tell you about that in a minute. Okay, so the nice little so you interact. So the ways of interacting with the audience. Look, you can just ask them a question verbally, okay, and that's enough to wake people up sometimes. Just ask them a question. Another thing you can do, and story hooks will help you find a good question to ask. Okay, another thing you can do is you can ask them to do a show of hands. Yes,
Right.
but if you're going to do that, right, you've got to remember that people are actually sitting back, especially after lunch. They're sitting back and letting you entertain them.
Yeah, right.
So they're not. It's not like they're in a conversation with you properly. They're sitting back. So if you're going to get them to do something, right, you need to warm them up.
Right.
So you notice how a speaker will say, "Okay, Stockholm, are we ready?" And about five people go,
Yeah.
"Yes." And the
Yeah.
speaker goes, "No, I said Stockholm, are we ready?" And on the second time, everyone's woken up and they all shout, "Yes." Okay. So it's little things like that. You need to remember that people are sitting back. So you've got to warm them up if you want them to do something.
Right. I can't just ask a point blank question and then
And
fall flat.
you'll just get silence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but other little tricks you can do is you can go, okay, well, if I say to people, put your hands up if, right, chances are most people won't because they're not, they can't be bothered or they're half asleep. So you can make that part of so put your hands up if you've thought about using other platforms other than Android and mobile and iPhone, and there'll be nobody will put their hand up and you go, see, not one of you has thought of this. Right. Okay. So you can play with the fact that almost no one is going to put their hand up.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I can expect that nobody will answer and use that as an advantage.
Absolutely. If you frame it right, frame it the right way around, you can go, ha, look, none of you. Okay. The last thing, which is a great tip somebody shared with me once, which is if you genuinely, I don't know if in your talk there is room for questions at the end, Q&A, for people to say questions. But again, if you get to the end of a talk and you say to people, okay, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, nobody says.
Nobody says anything. Okay. And it's also because people have they're in listening mode and they're just absorbing what you're saying. And then you're asking them to come up with a question. They go, okay. So the trick, and this works every single time, the trick to break that is you say to people, look, in a minute, I'm going to ask you if you've got any questions about what I've just presented. But first, turn to the person next to you and just find out what they thought of what I've said and what question would they like to ask. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, sort of warm up before asking the question.
Exactly. So everyone goes, "Oh, right, okay." They'll kind of wake up and they go, "Well," and suddenly you get this blah 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 of conversation going on around the room, and you let that run for 60 seconds, and then you call everyone back to you and go, "Okay, so who's got a question?" And you'll get hands going up.
Yeah, that's actually a real good advice.
Yeah, but it saves you from being the person standing at the front.
Yeah.
Going, nobody's got any questions. Okay, so little things like that. So try to interact with the audience at several places during your presentation. Yeah, try to interact with them, even if it's just asking them a question, and that will keep them awake. Keep them awake. Okay. Right, so listen, we've covered quite a few ideas. So we've got the story hook, the movie time story with more added meaning. We've got maybe a man in a hole structure to go with that. Then you're going to go into the body of the talk about what you've been working on. So we're talking about social proof and the innovation curve. And then you're going to come back to the story at the end to tie it all back together again.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Right. Well.
Right.
At least.
But in terms of your other point about there are so many different ways to do it. Yes, there are. There are lots of different ways to tell stories. You just have to keep trying and seeing which ones work for you. Even I try something different every time. Right. Jay, we look forward to seeing you recording. Best of luck on the 5th of December.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Come back on the Slack channel when it's done, and we'll share this recording.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gene. I'm just going to stop the recording now.
All right.